I will do one semi-seasonal thing here. How's that? I saw some discussion about the manger stuff. Okay? And if you don't know what the manger stuff is, archaeology has assisted us in translation of the Bible and in understanding of words in the Bible. And fundamentally, there are a lot of Christmas items, Advent items, that came long, long, long after the time of the New Testament. Here in America, most of our traditions go back to Europe. Most everybody who came here initially, anyways, came from Europe and brought those traditions with them and understandings as well. So there's a lot of Christmas hymns that have some of the deepest Trinitarian theology I've ever heard have been in Christmas. It's normally in the verses that don't get sung. So then there would be the really bad Christmas hymns with, little Lord Jesus, no crying he makes. What do you mean, no crying he makes? Did a Gnostic write this? What? Of course Jesus cried. What are you talking about? And then there's something about, what was the one about how white Jesus was? This type of stuff. And, it came from Germany or Ireland or, something like that. And you just have to be aware of that kind of stuff. You've got those types of traditions. And the same thing with how you would understand certain words in the Bible. And Europeans, obviously in the Middle Ages, things like that, medieval period, you would have farm animals and things like that right outside the door of your house. If you had a house, it might have been a hovel, but the idea was there was no room for them in the inn, and so Jesus was laid in a manger. And so you've got this picture of, and, it's on 70 million Christmas cards and everything else, if people still do Christmas cards anymore, where you have the manger scene and it's out in a stable yard and, there's not a home to be seen nearby. And, this is where Joseph ended up, things like that. There's a lot of problems with that imagery. And the problem is you mention problems that imagery and everybody gets mad at you for mentioning there's problems with that imagery because it's what you grew up with. It's all around you. You may have a manger scene out in your front yard right now. Maybe at your church, there's, the little manger and Joseph and Mary and all the rest of the stuff. And the little drummer boy. What? Where did that one come from? I've always wondered, the little drummer boy. Drummer boy, what? That's when Jesus cried, was, yeah, you bet. Brum, 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 brum. And then I saw a meme today. Oh, was it Babylon Bee that said, man, I'm glad the drummer boy's gone. Oh, no, here comes the bagpipe boy or something like that. It's like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's pretty weird. Anyway, all that stuff, accretions over time, traditions, everything else. So we start, putting together a view of what a house looked like in Bethlehem in the first century. And the reality was that many of them were built in such a fashion that we talk about farm animals. And again, we keep transporting things outside of ancient Israel to Europe. Okay, and so you've got cows and you've got all this type of stuff. The animals that would be dependent upon by someone in Bethlehem in those days would not necessarily be, a big steer or something like that. They would be a little bit smaller in size, smaller farm animals type thing. Anyways, what we've discovered is that many of these homes were a single unit, and that many of these animals would be kept in a particular part of the house. It was actually under the same roof, but that's where the animals were kept. So, so it would be cordoned off, so they weren't just wandering around all over the place, but it would be cordoned off. And if you had heat during the winter, that would help with keeping your animals alive because they were a major source of your food, eggs and things like that, milk. And so in all probability, when you think about it, when Joseph and Mary go to Bethlehem, they have family there. That's the city of David. So it would be in that culture, even a remote relative is still a relative. And there was a much, much, much higher emphasis on taking care of people, on hospitality, especially within families, that it would be almost unthinkable that Joseph would take his pregnant wife to a city where they don't know anybody, and they wouldn't know anybody, and so she has to give birth in a cow stall. In all probability, what happens is because of the census, because of the registration, may not have been a census, a registration, you have a lot of extra people in town, and so there's no room, as in a separate room in the house to have the child, and so she would have had the child in the main area of the house, and then would have been laid in a manger, which would have been inside the house. There wasn't another bed to put the child in or something like that. This would have been something where cloth would have been laid down, and it may have been used as a manger so that the animals could feed from it, but it was repurposed in this instance to put a child there. And the point was that they weren't in their own home. It was not that they were refugees. It's like, oh, please. It was that they were not hyper wealthy. Jesus wasn't being born into wealth and power and privilege, and he was born in a regular family. It wouldn't really have been an indication of deep poverty either, because there would have been someone that would have brought them in, a family member within their tribe, within their family group, at least had somewhat of a home, and of course a carpenter, and would have been sort of middle class. They wouldn't have been on the very edges of society. They would have been somewhere in the middle, sort of normal people, which in those days would still not have nearly the comfort or the stability that we would have today as a middle-class American. And certainly the threats of war and everything else that would come along with that would be much more prevalent, as would be proven only 40 years later when Judea was ravaged by Titus and Roman legions. So in all probability then, all that stuff about camels and all that stuff, and hopefully everybody knows that the wise men come at a completely different time period. They're not there at the time of the birth. They're probably 2 years later. But so much, tradition develops that you end up reading the text through the lens of that tradition. And that happens to all of us. That is not anything that is at all unusual. We're all guilty of it. And the danger comes when it ends up creating theology and doctrine. It's not a big deal that you have a nativity, but are you willing to look at it and go, oh, that didn't really happen? Okay. Or do you just grab onto it and go, we've had this in our family forever. I'm going to get mad at you for daring to tell me that that's probably really not what happened. That kind of stuff happens all the time. You run into people like that all the time. They get mad at you for going, well, in all probability, it wasn't really that way, and they just become very, very angry. It is a relevant connection, to the Advent season and to what happened in the Nativity and the Incarnation. All these things are vitally important, but it also sort of gives you an illustration of how and why we have to hold to the authority structures that we do, and why and how certain doctrines and beliefs have developed over time that the apostles never dreamed of, and yet now they are vitally important.